Okay, so thanks for the invitation. It's nice to give a talk. So this is joint work with Jayakrishan Nair, and this is a paper which appeared in Performance 2020. And it's already available everywhere, so you can check it out whenever you want. So the title is Network Speed Scaling. I will make sure that everybody understands at least what is network speed scaling. So let me begin with, okay, what is the problem? Yeah. So let's look at the simplest scheduling problem. So there is a fixed speed server and job arrivals are happening over time. So each job is like arrives at a particular time, it's processed at whatever time and it departs. And the difference between the two is called as what is called as job flow time, or in our usual parlance, it is the delay a job experiences. And the objective is to minimize the total flow time, and you're allowed to preempt jobs if you want. So depending on the job sizes, the server could choose which job to process among all its outstanding jobs. So in this setting, everything is known, and the optimal algorithm turns out to be what is called as SRPT: serve the job with the smallest remaining time at each point of time. So every time you find a set of outstanding job, look at the one which has the least remaining size and process that job, and everything is essentially over. There's nothing to be done hereafter. So now let's look at a more complicated setting where the server now is allowed to tune its speed. So that is what a modern data center looks like, and all these servers now can actually work at different speeds. And if they work at speed s, the amount of power they spend are going to be is given by p of s, where p of s is some convex function. In particular, p of s could be s to the power alpha for alpha greater than 2. So now a server could actually not only choose which job to process, it also can choose what speed to work at. And if it chooses a higher speed, it's going to pay a higher price in terms of its power cost. So now a simple way of formulating the problem is that not only you're interested in minimizing the total flow time, but also you add the total energy you're going to spend in the system. There are many other ways of formulating this problem. This is one of the simplest ones. So now there is a trade-off. Do you want to serve a job very fast, which will make the flow time small, but it will increase the total energy? And because you're looking at a objective function, which is the sum of the two, there is a trade-off between the two. So even under this setting, the scheduling algorithm remains the same, that if a server is going to work on a particular job, that job better be the job with the smallest remaining processor time. But what speed to work at, that is a complicated business to figure out. So there are two variables now: which job to process and at what speed to process that job. One answer is easy, other is not. Here is one way of rethinking about this problem, which makes it simpler. So let's look at across time, how much time a job spends in the system. So essentially the projection of this job on the x-axis means that this blue job is going to stay in the system for so long. So let's call it the arrival and the departure time. And what you want to represent is that the flow time, which is nothing but the addition of this plus this plus this and this four projections on the x-axis, is actually your flow time. Another way to see this is that suppose at particular time t, let n of t be the number of outstanding jobs. So in this particular example, I'm sampling a particular time t. There are two jobs which are which are outstanding at that time. So this would be n of t would be 2. At this particular time it will be again be 2. At this point it will again be 2. So that's just an example, but in general, what you can say is that the addition across time of all these jobs, which is the flow time, is nothing but the integral over time of n of t itself. This is just a reformulating the flow time objective. And with this, what you end up getting is that the overall objective is an integral of summation of two integrals. One integral is the flow time, which is integration of n of t dt. And the second integral is the energy, which is integrated, the power integrated over time. And s of t is the speed of the server at time t. So this reformulation allows you to write it as a single integral essentially of two additive terms. So that is why it helps. Otherwise, it's the same thing. There's no change, no approximation here. And this reformulation, as we'll see, helps a lot. So what the problem we are going to look at is the following. So suppose you are given a arbitrary network where the same colored node means that it's a source and destination, which wants to communicate information between each other. So S1 wants to communicate to D1, the red node S2 wants to go to D2, and S3 wants to send its package to D3. and the network for ease here is going to be directed. Things become slightly more complicated when it's undirected. So now what is going to happen is that packets are going to arrive at each of these individual sources, and using this common network, they have to be sent to their respective destinations. So now the new objective, which is an addition across sources. So for the flow time, what we want to do is we want to count the flow time for all packets flowing through each of these sources, which is compactly written as the summation of Ni of t, where Ni of t is the number of outstanding jobs for source I anywhere in the network, and sum it across all possible sources. Similarly, you look at all the nodes in the network, and for node j, let's the speed of that would be Sj at time t, which is Sj of t. And you count across all nodes in the network the power which is being consumed, and you take the integral so that the first term becomes the flow time and the second term becomes the total energy being spread in the system. And what are the decisions? So you want to minimize this objective, and the decisions to be made are, for each node, what speed should it work for processing its packets? For source destination pairs, how should their packets be routed? And at each node, how should the packets which are available with it should be scheduled over time? So these are three interrelated decision variables which affect our objective function, and you want to minimize this objective over all these three possible decision variables. So let me remind you that I'll be happy to take questions in between. So if anything is not clear, it's better to stop me right there. Okay, so here is our simplest setting which you want to solve. So we're also going to look at what is called as online algorithm. So let me just be very specific about what I mean. So by online algorithm, I mean that at any point of time t, each node only has causal information about what has happened in the past, and all its decision can be made depending on that. But the decisions are centralized. So each node is not making a decentralized decision. So given the complete history at time t, a centralized decision is being made about the three decision variables we have, which is routing, scheduling, and the speed choice. So once we say that we're going to look at online algorithms, the first thing we should also state is what is the metric with respect to the online algorithms, which is slightly different than our usual metrics. So let me specify what that is going to be. So this is called as what is known as competitive ratio. And what it does is it takes the ratio of the cost of an online algorithm, which only works in causal information, and an offline algorithm, which is allowed to know everything in future. So essentially you can just say at starting time t equal to 0, the offline algorithm has information about all job arrivals over the complete time horizon you're going to work with. And on top, you're going to allow an optimal algorithm to work with that offline input. This may or may not be known, but that's the benchmark against which we are going to compare an online algorithm. So let V on of sigma be the profit or the cost for the online algorithm on input sigma, and V OPT be the optimal offline algorithm's cost or profit for the same input sigma. We're going to take the ratio of the two and look at the worst possible input sequence there can be. That ratio is defined to be the competitive ratio of a particular online algorithm. So if you've never seen this before, maybe I'll process it slowly. So this is a very, very pessimistic metric. What are we doing? We're looking at an online algorithm, which is processing data causally. It doesn't know what's going to happen in future. While an OPT, which is defined to be, it's given all the information in future, and it's allowed to work in the optimal possible way, which may or may not be known. So we don't worry about how to solve that. The profit of the two is taken as the ratio, and over all possible input sequences, you're going to look at the worst possible ratio of the two. So if you are more interested in network network stochastics, this is also, one can say this as a sample path result, that for each sample path sigma, I want this ratio to be small. That's essentially what this means. If the stochastic, yeah, sorry?
V is the cost, not profit.
It could, so I'm defining it generally. In this particular example, it will be the summation of the flow time and the energy, which you would like to minimize. So that is why this ratio is always larger than 1. Yeah. And you would like to minimize this with respect to sigma. Sorry, so the maximum is with respect to the sigma. That is the worst possible input which can maximize the ratio. And my objective is to design an online algorithm which could keep it as small as possible.
Yes.
So this ratio is with respect to all the inputs and a particular choice of an online algorithm. Our objective really is to find an online algorithm which can minimize this.
Okay.
In the stochastic input case, it is slightly easier. It's just the expected value of the online algorithm with respect to the expected value of the optimal offline algorithm. So there is no maximization with respect to sigma because the input is stochastic. So we'll look at both these cases and they give rise to very different results. As you can expect, the worst case setting should be much harder than the stochastic input case. So this could be a good question, a good point to ask questions for model, metric, or anything general before I go into anything specific. If there's anything unclear, I would be happy to resolve any doubts at this point. About the problem statement?
Make assumptions on sigma, distribution of sigma later.
Right. So in the worst case, we are not going to make any assumptions on sigma. That's the strength of this model. It's a worst case input. Sigma could even be designed by an adversary. So you specify an algorithm. An adversary can choose a sigma depending on that algorithm, and I guarantee the guarantee we are going to give will hold irrespective of how you design your sigma. So you could actually choose a bad sigma for me, but I will make sure my algorithm is robust to it.
Okay.
In the stochastic input setting, we'll assume something about the input. So that is why the max disappears.
I think there is a question in the chat. How is regret related to competitive ratio?
Right. So regret is much, what do you say, stronger notion. So what there one does is you take the difference of the two. So I have taken the ratio of the two. There, what you will do is you take V opt minus V on, and you try to claim that that is growing sublinearly in the time horizon. So if one could show that, that would be so much nicer. But for most online algorithms, it's not possible to do that. And that is why we take the ratio of the two. So ratio is much weaker, as you can see. Let's suppose I show that the ratio is 2. It's a weaker notion compared to the difference of the two being less than log t, for example, where t is the time horizon. So that's a good question. Typically in online learning, you care about regret because you can show that the regret is bounded or sublinearly with respect to the time horizon. Here, in most cases, we can't do it. So a more reasonable metric is the competitive ratio, which is the ratio of the two.
So our goal is simply to say that this is bounded by some number.
We would like it to be as close to 1. See, the best thing one could happen is it's just equal to 1. So you would ideally would like to be this to as close to 1 as possible. So the next possible goal is to show that it is a constant. It doesn't depend on the problem definition. So that itself is a big thing. If you have a complicated problem, just to show that the competitive ratio is independent of all the parameters of the problem specification and the input, that itself is an interesting result in its own right. And among all such algorithms, you would like to find the one which has the smallest competitive ratio.
Yeah.
So just by looking at the definition, there is no guarantee that such a thing even exists, that a constant competitive ratio can even be shown. So that itself turns out to be hard for many of the problems. All right, good. So hopefully the metric is clear, the problem is clear, and the non-triviality is clear. So let's go to the, as I said, the goal is to figure out an online algorithm with least possible competitive ratio. Okay, so what do we know? So here is a setting which is a simpler setting. So there is a single server which is allowed to speed scale, that is with choice of S equal, which speed choice S, the power spent is P of S. Now almost everything is known for this problem when there is a single server. Optimal scheduling, as I pointed out before, remains the SRPT algorithm, and optimal speed choice has been shown in this couple of papers in 2009 and 10. What it tells you is that the speed to be chosen at time t is P inverse. P is the power function of the number of packets which are outstanding in the system. So n of t is the number of outstanding packets at time t. So you just pick S of t to be equal to P inverse of n of t. What this entails is that the power used, which is P of S of t, is exactly equal to the number of jobs in the system. That is what the intuition is, that the power spent by your algorithm should be equal to the number of jobs in the system. So that's roughly the intuition. And using that, they're able to show that the best competitive ratio one can get is 2. And this algorithm actually achieves that. So both sided results are available in this bunch of papers. The next or the simplest setting from moving from single server is a parallel bank of servers. So there is a single queue in which packets arrive, and there are k parallel servers. Each of them have an identical power function P of S. Now the question of scheduling becomes interesting. So no longer SRPT is optimal. So in multiple servers, it's no longer optimal that among all the outstanding jobs, you choose the jobs with the smallest size and run them parallelly on these servers. It's no longer optimal. What we were able to show recently with another paper with Jayakrishan Nair is that if you run multi-server SRPT, which is not an optimal algorithm, what you can show is that the competitive ratio is 4 times 2 to the power alpha. So it is much larger than a competitive ratio of 2 for a single server, but it's known that single server problem actually is much harder than a single server problem. Little more complicated algorithms can actually get you an order alpha or 2 times alpha competitive ratios, but those algorithms are more complicated and require a little bit of computation to go on as soon as a new job arrives. So the multi-server SRPT is elegant in the sense the algorithm is very simple. At each point of time t, so you have k servers, pick the k smallest jobs and run them on k servers. Again, the speed choice is essentially the same. So make sure that the total speed used across all the servers is equal to P inverse of n of t. That's what it tells you. That the total power spent by the system across all servers should be equal to the number of jobs which are currently in the system. And that is across all algorithms, that is the speed choice being used. So it's not only has a intuition, but also allows you some elegant analysis.
So this alpha has to be greater than 1?
Alpha has to be greater than 1 because otherwise it's a trivial problem. Typically between 2 and 3 is what in practice people observe. So for microprocessors, it's between 2 and 3.
Okay.
So what do we know for networks? So I told you what we know about a single server problem, a parallel bank of server problems, and the answer unfortunately tells you, comes out to be that nothing much. Essentially, people have restricted their attention to a parallel bank of servers, and there is a large body of work, but nobody has really thought about extending it to a network case, where I should point out that there's a large body of work on throughput optimality, which is a very different metric. What we are doing here is we are directly handling delay plus the total power to be used in the system. Throughput optimality is a slightly weaker metric, which asks you what is the maximum arrival rates such that the total system or a network can be stabilized. And then lots of different control problems have been solved, how to route, how to schedule, and so on. But for the specific problem where we're directly handling the delay and the energy, as far as we knew, nothing much was known. So before going into the worst case, and so I'll split the talk into 2 parts, worst case input and the stochastic input. So rather than giving you details of what we do, I thought it would be nicer if you actually I can say about what is a general technique in handling the worst case input, because solving the problem we are looking at, it becomes extremely messy. So I thought this might actually be easier for students to handle and also useful for their own purposes. So here is a quick recap. What are we after? We are trying to, for a particular online algorithm, we are trying to analyze how large its competitive ratio is, which is this quantity, that the ratio of the profit of the 2 algorithms maximized over all possible inputs. So here is what is generically called a potential function idea. If you have seen stochastic network analysis, you might have seen Lyapunov functions. Is very similar to that. So let's recall that the cost we are interested in is the flow time cost, which is the integral of the number of jobs you're holding in the system at time t, and the rate at which you're spending your power, which is P of S of t. I'm just subscripting everything with A for an algorithm and O for the OPT. So subscript O is the OPT, which possibly I don't know. It also knows everything in future. And A is any causal algorithm. Now let's magically assume that there exists a potential function, which is just a function phi of t, such that the following condition holds. So what is this condition? So let's look at the first two terms. The first two terms are instantaneous cost for my algorithm. There's no integral. So it's just at a particular time t, what is my cost? So that's the holding cost for n of t number of jobs plus the power, which is p of s of t. On the right hand side, it's the OPT's instantaneous cost, n0 of t plus p of s0 of t. Now this is the magical in between thing, that the derivative of this potential function is being added to the instantaneous cost of the algorithm, and there is a constant which is sitting in front of the instantaneous optimal cost. So suppose such a function exists, phi of t, for which this equation holds true. This is called the drift condition. We are essentially capturing how the potential function is drifting, and for any c greater than 1. So suppose such a condition holds. Moreover, the function phi also satisfies these two properties. For the moment, I have no idea what this function is. I'm just saying, suppose such a function exists, then I can say something interesting. So suppose before any job arrives, phi of 0 is 0, and after all jobs are processed, phi of infinity is also 0. So system starts at rest and ends at rest. And in between, there is no discontinuity, or at a discontinuity, phi of t does not increase. If it decreases, I'm okay. So this condition is called as the boundary condition. So the rest condition and the no jump condition are called the boundary conditions. Under these two conditions, just integrating this particular instantaneous cost equation from like very basic calculus, you can say that the same c, I can actually put it outside the integral also. The integral of this vanishes because at the rest, at both extremes, it's 0 and it never jumps. So this integral essentially goes to 0, and you take an integral on the left and on the right, you end up getting that the integral itself is bounded by c times the integral of the OPT. And if you can recollect, this is nothing but the cost of the algorithm, overall cost of the algorithm, and this is the overall cost of the OPT. So suddenly from nowhere, I can actually bound the cost of an algorithm with respect to the OPT, irrespective of what the input is, as long as this magical function exists. That's all. So end result is that the competitive ratio of such an algorithm is at most c. Now, the biggest challenge here is actually to construct the potential function. So if such a potential function exists, we know what to do. How to construct one, there is no recipe. Again, let me point back to the Lyapunov function analogy. Similar to the Lyapunov function, there is, for any problem which Lyapunov function works, there is no easy method to figure it out. It's essentially an art form. For every new problem, you might have to do some trial and error, and even that is generally not useful. You actually have to make some educated guesses and then work it out. So any questions on this? The basic idea of what we do when the input is worst case? All right, so let me give you one example of such a potential function to just show that such things do exist. So we're going to take back to the simplest example I gave for a single server problem where we know everything about it. So let nq comma t be the number of outstanding jobs with size at least q at time t. So remember, n of t is the number of jobs which are remaining at time t. Among them, I am doing a further classification. So this example will help you. So suppose there are 4 jobs, 1 to colored in this particular way, and the height here represents the size of the job which is remaining at this point of time. So let's say q1 is some level. nq1 of t is nothing but the number of jobs which are above it. So in this case, it is 4. For q2, the number of jobs with size at least q2 is just 2, and n of q3 is just 1. So that is what, it's an inverse histogram if you can think of it, with respect to the size of the remaining jobs. So at n of 0 is n of t itself. Now here is a candidate choice of a potential function. Remember, potential functions, you can always create more and still make it work. This is one candidate potential function which works. So there's no uniqueness here. So what we're going to do is we're you're going to look at this quantity n of q comma t and subtract out the similar quantity for the OPT. So that is what it means by nq of t minus n0 of q2. So this is the difference of the workload between the algorithm and the OPT. And you wrap a function f around it, which is related via the power function in this particular way. So don't ask me why this particular thing. I'm just giving an example that such a thing does hold. It's, yeah, if you read this a little more, it will be clear why this is correct, but I'll not go into it, that why this is the right thing to do. As long as the function is clear what I'm doing. So the function f I'm wrapping around is defined in this incremental way. F of I minus f of I minus 1 is this first derivative of p of p inverse of I, where p is nothing but our power function. Remember, p of s is s power alpha. So this is my potential function. Now quickly we can check that does it satisfy the boundary condition. So boundary condition required that there are no, see, beginning and ending, the phi of t should be evaluated to 0. So that is easy to check here, that before any job arrives, phi of 0 is 0. And if once all jobs disappear, phi of infinity is 0. That is easy to check. Only thing we need to check is what happens if a new job arrives, does this potential function have a jump or not, or a new job, or a job departs from the system. See, jobs are arriving and departing over time. So this is where interesting things are happening. If you look at a system where all jobs arrive at time 0, things are much easier to handle. Here we are handling directly the case where jobs are arriving and departing over time. So on an arrival of a new job, we claim that n of q and n0 of q increase by the same amount. So there is no change in phi of t. Just to see this, a new job has the same size for both the algorithm and the OPT. So there is no change in the difference of nq of t minus n0 of q of t. Individually, each of them increase, but the difference does not increase. Similarly, on a departure of a job, when does a job depart? When its current size is infinitesimally small. So this integral only gets affected. So in pictorially, the q is already very small for the job which is departing, and the integral, and this is why the integral actually is very interesting for defining phi of t. The integral does not get affected because the change is only exactly at q equal to 0. So in both the cases, when a new job arrives or a job departs from the system, this particular potential function does not change. So our boundary conditions are satisfied. Then the drift condition can be computed to look like this follows. So you can skip this. I am just here to show this. I'm not intending to spend any time on this. And our speed choice, which is exactly p inverse of n of t, will ensure that the drift condition which I want to hold holds with c equal to 2. So you don't have to parse this. I'm just stating this, trust me on this, that you can show that the drift is so much, and for the speed choice given by the algorithm, the drift condition holds with c equal to 2. So this is how typically a system is analyzed in the online setting. Any questions on this? Because now I'm going to talk really about the network setting. Until now, everything was the background. Students should have questions, so don't hesitate. If you have a question, ask. It's okay to go slow. Or maybe I'm doing such a great job that everything is clear. So, okay. All right, so let me move on. So now main challenge when designing such a potential function in networks. Currently, the example I gave you, there was just a single node. So there is not much to go wrong. So let's think of the simplest network as line network. So there is a single source, single destination, and there are a bunch of these servers in between where every packet has to go through each of these in sequence by the time it has to be delivered at its destination D1. So packets arrive into S1, right? So they are essentially synchronized for an algorithm or the OPT. It doesn't matter what an algorithm is doing or OPT is doing. Packet arrivals, the size and the time of it is exactly the same. So no matter what the algorithm is, which is what we saw for the single server setting. Problem starts because now the algorithm will decide at what speed to process these packets, and it may not be equal to the OPT. So the time at which these packets move from one server to the other, that is no more synchronized between an algorithm and the OPT. So this is an important point to understand, that the speed at which I work depends on my choice of the algorithm. I don't know what the OPT is doing. OPT is some beast which knows everything in future, is doing something very complicated. While I have an algorithm, or any algorithm you pick, which has to work on causal information, is going to make some decisions. Now, those decisions might differ compared to the OPT. And the decision essentially here in this particular setting is just the speed decision. At what speed should I process these packets? That results in non-synchrony of packet arrivals into any of these subsequent servers. And that is where the biggest problem starts. So now, like making sure that the boundary condition for a potential function is satisfied is very difficult to construct. So a potential function essentially will have some function of the outstanding number of jobs in different servers. That's roughly the idea. You can, yeah, don't hold me if somebody constructs a potential function which is not a function of this and still works, but more or less that is how a potential function is constructed. Because of these non-synchronized arrivals and inter-server departures and arrivals, what you're going to see is that Phi-T will have jumps. So you'll have to handle jumps. And that is why making or finding a potential function satisfying the boundary conditions in a network is hard. I'll give you an example how hard it is for this particular line network. So here is one example. I don't intend to intimidate you, but this is how difficult it is. So I will go over it very slowly, and hopefully you will stay with me. So here is the same line network, and I'm going to give an example of a potential function which will work for us. It will have jumps, but we should be able to control how large these jumps are. So for the server 1, I'm going to define, so remember NQ of T is the same quantity, number of jobs above a certain level of job size, NQ of T, sorry. So for the first server, it is identical to what we saw for the single server case, except for this normalization by K. So K is the number of servers in between source 1 and destination 1. So this quantity is exactly the same. Difference of the workload at the source server between the algorithm and the OPT. F is the same function. K is the only difference compared to the single server case. The more interesting things happen for internal servers. So look at any internal server, let it be the JH server. You look at the number of jobs which are currently outstanding to the left of it. So that is what this quantity is, starting from the second server over here. So this is the source server. I'm going to count this as my first intermediate server. So from starting from 1 to J, how many current outstanding jobs there are, and on this particular server, what is the number of jobs with size at least Q. So that is the first non-trivial quantity we are counting here. Then for the jth node, I'm going to define the potential function as the function f remains as it is. dj of qt is this quantity, and at plus 1 is the number of servers among all possible servers which have at least one outstanding jobs. So now you can see the complexity of it. The potential function for server 1 was just having a normalization which was a constant normalization, which is equal to k. So that doesn't change. But for the potential function for an internal server, I'm normalizing it with respect to the number of servers which have at least one outstanding job. So this quantity keeps changing. It could increase or it could decrease. So as soon as it decreases, this function could actually increase very rapidly, discontinuously. So this function indeed, in fact, will have jumps which we will be able to control. So the overall aggregate potential function, see, remember we have to finally give one potential function. So now we add these together. So we multiply or scale up the first potential function k times, and then add the potential function defined for each of these additively. So this is defined for 1, 2, 3 progressively, and you add all of them together. So now you can see already how difficult the choice of a potential function is, even for the simplest possible network. I want to work with the arbitrary general directed network. So as I said, this potential function does not satisfy the boundary condition as I defined. But what we can show here is that the total jump size can be controlled with respect to the optimal cost. So this C OPT is nothing but the total cost of the OPT with some constant D. And that is what we do to figure it out. For the rest of the talk, when I say worst case input, I'm not going to give you these unwieldy potential functions because they depend on the network, they depend on what algorithm I'm going to do. So I'm just going to state the algorithm and state the result, what we are going to get. But hopefully this slide tells you how difficult it is to construct these potential functions.
So the fact that it has jumps causes problems, but you are able to handle it using this bound.
Right. So what you do is you find the smallest bound on D, and then you add that to the competitive ratio essentially.
Oh, okay.
So if you remember that integration condition, the integration condition allows you to add that. So if your earlier bound was C, the new bound will be C plus D. So that is acceptable. All right, so now let me give what the algorithm looks. So also, if maybe I've not said it, that the choice of the potential function is directly influenced by what the algorithm you're going to run. So the algorithm for the line network we're going to do is the following. All servers are going to run at the same speed. Whenever I have a job to process, so red nodes here means that they at least have one job to process. Whenever I have a job to process, if I have no job, I'll just idle. If I have a job to process, all of them are going to run at the same speed, which is given by P inverse, which is the same power function as before. And it's a ratio of the two quantities, which is number of jobs in the system, the total number of jobs in the system divided by the active servers of the system. So in this particular case, there are just two active servers, 2 and k. So the denominator will be 2 plus 1. And you discount the fact that, so S1 is not counted as active server. S1 is always active as long as it has a job. So you look at sum across all servers, how many jobs there are, that's the numerator, and divide that. If you're not noticed, this will make sure that the total speed used in the system is exactly equal to the number of jobs in the system, because the total number of active servers is what you're going to add the power across. So the philosophy of choosing the speed remains as before in the parallel system, that the total power used in the system is equal to the number of jobs in the system. But now there are many problems. As you can see, the active number of servers keeps changing discontinuously, because as new jobs arrive or some jobs depart, this active server can go up or go down, and which affects our potential function. But essentially what I just said is that we are choosing this particular speed so that the total power used at a particular time in the system is always equal to the number of jobs in the system, which balances out our two metrics. One is the flow time, other is the power. So after saying so much, eventually the guarantee we can give is as follows. So it's slightly a complicated expression. For alpha equal to 2, it evaluates to 18. That what are we saying? That independent of the size of this network, which is given by a total number of servers is k, we are able to show that this particular algorithm has a competitive ratio at most 18, independent of the number of jobs which arrive in the system and independent of the number of servers in the system, which is the first criteria we would like to know. 18 is a large number because our metric is a ratio, but still this is a non-trivial result in its own right because it's independent of all the parameters of the network. Next, we go to the next most complicated network we can think of. So there is still a single source and single destination, but there are now parallel branches, each branch having the same size. So script P is the number of parallel paths, and each path has k number of servers. So this can be relaxed, but I'm going to state this result for this. Now, again, let's skip these details are not important. So what is important is that the source is going to use round robin scheduling over all its parallel paths. That's the first thing it does, because now scheduling is important. Earlier scheduling was not important. There was just a single path. Now how to route, sorry, not scheduling, routing. So routing is the simplest round robin. You choose the speed of the source in a particular manner. Don't worry about that. The interesting thing is that the speed of each of these branches is exactly 1 by the number of paths in the system. So the total speed is split equally between all these parallel paths. So that is what this means. The speed of each internal server, which is any server on any of these paths, is exactly equal to the speed of the source server divided by the number of parallel paths there are. The exact choice depends on a lot of these things, which are not important for our discussion. So two things which are important are that routing is pretty trivial, and two, the speed is chosen in such a way that source is working at p times the speed of any of the other servers in the system. With this, what we can show Again, it's a slightly complicated expression, but for alpha equal to 2, it evaluates to 54. But again, importantly, it's independent of the size of the network, which is P or K. P is the number of paths and K is the number of servers on each path and the number of jobs arriving in the system. So it's completely independent of the system and the input, which is somewhat more important than the exact number of competitive ratio, which is quite large, 54. It's essentially 3 times of what we saw earlier. And for each of these, you have to construct a new potential function, which you can see even for the simplest series network was quite complicated. This is super complicated, but somehow it still works. Now let's look at the most general network we can handle. It's not as general as we would like. So what does our general star network means is the following. So star doesn't mean star topology. Star means there is a caveat to the as general network we can handle. So this is the network we would like to handle, but the network we can handle is as follows, that between each source and destination, it's a series parallel network. There could be paths crossing these guys. So that's okay. That we don't care. But between each source and each destination, it's a series parallel network. That is all restriction we are going to enforce. For different source destination pairs, they could have common nodes. So for example, this particular node could be common to multiple paths for different source and destination. All we are saying is that there is no two paths crossing the same node for a single source destination pair. That is where our problem starts. So it's not as general as you would like, but it's not too bad. So in this setting, again, I'll just specify the routing rule. So first thing to notice is some definition here, that because it's a series parallel network, you look at any node and look at the number of different paths for any source destination pair which cross it. Remember, for each source destination pair, there is exactly one path which crosses a node. So you just essentially count the number of paths for each node which are crossing for different source destination pairs. And among all nodes, find the one which has the largest number of such paths crossing it. And we'd call that number of paths as Dmax. So essentially you can say it's the largest degree of a node in this graph. So Dmax is the node with Dmax is the largest degree of a node in this graph. Algorithm is simple. Each source essentially does round robin over its all parallel paths. Each node in the system now has multiple jobs to process because it could have, so for this particular guy, okay, this particular node could have, okay, this particular node could be getting packets from S1 and S2. So what it's going to do is, it's going to simultaneously process all its outstanding jobs corresponding to different source destination pairs. And what it does is, it reduces the speed compared to if there was a single source destination pair. So suppose SV is the speed with which node V works if there was a single source destination pair. That is what is SV is. It is going to multiply that or essentially reduce its speed by this quantity, which depends on Dmax. So larger the degree, slower is the speed at which any of these nodes are going to work, because they are working at that many more parallel jobs at the same time. And this tau is some parameter you can choose. After all is said and done, what we end up getting is that the competitive ratio does depend on Dmax, but it's still non-trivial, because a trivial answer is actually Dmax to the power of alpha. What we are able to show after doing all the work we do, that it depends linearly on the maximum degree of this node in the network. So the punchline essentially here is that the competitive ratio depends on the network only via the congestion and not on the number of nodes in the system. So it's not increasing as such in the size of the network. It's only telling you which node is getting the largest chunk of overlap between different source destination pairs. So more is the congestion on a particular node, larger is going to be the competitive ratio, but that also grows only linearly. So now technically this is no longer a constant competitive result, but it is still something which is non-trivial. All right, so with this, I'm going to close the discussion on worst case input. So are there any questions on this? It might be a good time to ask before you switch over to the stochastic setting, which is much easier and instructive to handle.
The fact that it does not depend on number of nodes.
Yes.
Like like why is that? Although you've given some explanation, but maybe in other words.
Right. So what technically is happening is that this particular, yeah. So what we are doing is that each source is behaving as though there is nobody else in the network. That's what it does, is thinking that there is nobody else in the network, and it chooses its round robin. This is not a what to say intelligent strategy, because what could happen is that on a particular path there could be so many other source destination pairs which have a common path, but it's disregarding that. It's just saying that I don't care who else is in the network, I'm going to, among all my paths, I'm going to treat them equally. That's what it does. So now what could result is that a particular node might see a lot of traffic because of that. So to compensate for that, what we are doing is that the speed is getting scaled down. So because that particular node, so suppose the node which has the largest degree, let's focus our attention on that. What it does is it reduces its speed compared to if there was only a single source destination pair by this quantity, which is decreasing as Dmax increases. So this is the compensation essentially needed to make sure that it does not grow with the size of the network. So precise answer I don't have, but this is the easiest explanation one can give, because eventually all of it depends also on the potential function.
Okay.
But this is the each source is doing a dumb strategy, but that dumbness is getting countered by reducing the speed of each node in the network by choosing a particular choice of the speed dampening factor, which depends on Dmax. So if I have too many paths crossing me, I will reduce my speed that much more. So I get a hit in terms of the flow time, but I make sure that the power doesn't increase too much. And overall, once you put it together, one can show that it doesn't increase with the size of the network. But it's a good point that why it doesn't. So it's not obvious why it doesn't. The biggest takeaway is that essentially each node, each source is treating its all paths parallel, and each node is also treating all the paths crossing it as kind of parallel. So that is why this network is breaking it into multiple parallel streams. That is why it really doesn't depend on the size of the network. Because if it did not depend on the size of network for a single source destination pair, the way I am fragmenting this network, I'm essentially making multiple copies of it, which are slightly slower. That's all. And each of these multiple copies can be shown to be independent of the size of the network.
And the strategy does increase the constant a little bit.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So constant here, I don't remember, but yeah, it could be large. It's an order thing.
Okay.
All right, so let's just skip this. I said enough. So now let's look at the stochastic case here, where one could say something very instructive. So to make sure that everybody is on the same page, so in the stochastic setting, now the algorithm knows a little bit of information. What is happening is that at each node, so let's say the blue node, the arrival process now is well defined. It's, let's say, a Poisson process with arrival rate lambda I. So now I know essentially everything there is to know about the arrival process. The OPT and I have the same information about the arrival process. The OPT is allowed to find some optimal solutions which I don't know. So now the difference is between computation versus information. See, in the worst case setting, there is information mismatch between the algorithm and the OPT. OPT knows too much while I know very little. Here, I know everything essentially about what's going to happen in future. Everything is stochastic. In the simplest case, Poisson with rate lambda I. OPT is some genie which can compute the optimal algorithm, what it should do, while an algorithm you have to propose. So that is the difference between an algorithm and OPT in the stochastic setting. Now with Poisson arrivals, I can replace all my objective function with expectations. So now this is the expected flow time. Is there a question on the chat? Rishikesh, is it an old question or now?
Yeah, sir, I posted it.
Yeah, can you just say it rather than me reading it?
Yeah, sir, like if the selection of potential function is algorithm dependent, then the upper bound of the CR, completed ratio,
yes,
is it dependent on the selection of potential function, or is it like general upper bound?
No, that's not. So upper bound is general. but to show that the potential function intimately is dependent on the algorithm. See, the condition we want to show is that the cost of the algorithm plus the drift of the potential function is less than or equal to C times the cost of the OPT. So all of this depends closely on the choice of the algorithm and the choice of the potential function. But the result you get is a C bound for that algorithm itself.
So does the bound will like still hold if I choose a different potential function? Like
No, not necessarily. So that's why that is a very magical condition you need to satisfy. So you have to choose a potential function in such a way that that condition is satisfied. That is all you need. You can construct it in so many different ways.
In other words, we are showing that there exists a potential function such that this bound holds.
Correct. So for an algorithm, somehow you construct one potential function for which the bound holds. That's all you need to do.
The same as Lyapunov function.
Exactly. So this philosophy is very identical. It's just that this drift condition is kind of different because there is no expectation here.
Yeah.
okay, sir.
All right. So in my limited 10 minutes, let me try to squeeze in my stochastic case. So now the objective function simplifies. Now it's just an expected value of the flow time and the expected value of the energy spent in the system. And again, the decisions are similar. Routing, that how should I route my incoming traffic over multiple paths of the network, and for each node, what speed should I choose? So now we'll first lower bound the cost of the OPT. I don't know what OPT is going to do, so let's just lower bound the cost of the OPT. So very basic first principles lower bound. So look at a node V and look at all the traffic that is passing through it. So lambda IP be any feasible flow on path P for the IS source destination pair. So here is lambda 3P is the third path, for the third source on path P, how much traffic is going through. Similarly, lambda 1P. So what you want is that the objective function you want to minimize. The second term, the first term is the one thing but the expected flow time. Now one can simply argue that suppose the speed at which a node V works is slower than the total amount of traffic coming into it. So remember, the superposition of Poisson is also Poisson. So essentially the aggregate process a node V looks at is an aggregate Poisson. So look at the total traffic coming into the network. And if the speed at which this node works is slower than the total traffic coming into the net, we know that Q at this particular node is going to blow up, which will essentially result that the flow time is actually infinity. So the first necessary condition for an OPT is that if lambda IP is any feasible flow, then the speed at which a node V should work should never be less than the aggregate traffic crossing through it. So the expected speed at which a node V works should be at least the total amount of traffic going through it. I don't know what this is. I'm just saying any feasible traffic. So if it is feasible, it better be that this relation holds. All right, and this is for the OPT. So this is the first simple thing we're going to use. The second simple thing we're going to use is the following. As simple as that is the Jensen's inequality. So now look at a node V, look at the power it's going to use, which is P of S of V, and look at the expected value of that. By Jensen's inequality, we know that since P is convex, this inequality holds, that P of expected value of S of V. And what I just said, that the expected speed of a node has to be at least the aggregate traffic going through that node. This is the stability condition. What we end up getting is a lower bound on the expected power a node V is going to use in terms of the traffic it's going to see. So what this ends up giving you is, this is my objective function, which has two parts, flow time and energy. I'm going to disregard the first part, given that the Qs are stable, and only lower bound the expected amount of power, which is at least given by the following. So I'm just going to count the energy cost. So I'm now replacing this P of SV of T by just P of lambda of V by these conditions, by Jensen's and stability. So I'm just replacing this summation by the total amount of traffic going through the node V, which is lambda V, which is, if you were to look at here, this same thing under our flow conservation constraint, that the flow coming into a node should be equal to flow going out of the node. So what have I done? I have bounded the cost of any algorithm, in particular OPT or the optimal algorithm, in terms of just the feasible flow on any path in the network And now I can always minimize this, that this is at least so much. So I can minimize this with respect to lambda IP. So what am I solving? I'm solving a convex program with respect to the fraction of flow passing through all possible paths in the network. That is all. So this is only a function of lambda IP under the flow conservation constraints. So this is going to be my lower bound on the cost of the OPT, which is also going to surprisingly give me the algorithm also. Typically, this should only give you a lower bound. I'm going to use this to define my algorithm also. So algorithm is as follows. So suppose lambda star is the optimal solution of this lower bound. So lambda star IP is the amount of traffic which the OPT should, like, not, I should not call OPT. This solution of this program gives me on for the source I and path P. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to route that much amount of traffic on path P for the source I. And similarly using for node V, I'm going to look at the aggregate traffic crossing through the particular node. That is going to be lambda star of V, and add a little bit of fudge factor so that I can maintain stability. Remember, the speed at which I operate should be greater than the arrival rate so that the queue is stable. So I'm going to add a little bit of fudge factor. How to get this is non-trivial, but don't worry, this is a little bit more than the arrival rate. So what am I doing here? I'm doing two things. One, I have lower bounded the cost of OPT via this convex program. And also using the same convex program, I am defining an algorithm. So this typically doesn't happen, but this is a very special case where we have been able to do both using a single convex program. Typically, one does follow this approach to find a lower bound and then does something else on the algorithm side and somehow try to bridge the gap between the two. Here we're using this solution of this convex program for both lower bound as well as to define the algorithm also. So what is the guarantee I can give? So remember, the guarantee in the stochastic case is the expected value of the cost divided by the expected value of the OPT's cost. So what we can show is that the competitive ratio is at most a product of two factors. One is given by theta alpha, other is given by theta networks. What this means is this depends only on alpha and this depends on the network topology. So theta alpha is just simply a function of alpha. Nothing very interesting happening here. Theta network is slightly complicated. So let's say LP is the path or the length of a path for a particular source destination pair. So for the ith source destination pair, let LP be the length of the path for a path P. And among all such paths, let Lmin be the length of the shortest path. So we are isolating a single source destination pair. LP is the length of the path P and L minimum is the length of the shortest path among all such paths for ith source destination pair. And remember, lambda star IP is found by solving the convex program. So even the guarantee theta network depends on the solution of this theta star IP. So let me just parse this through. The theta I for the ith source destination pair, what this theta I is? Theta I is a summation or a weighted sum of this traffic split lambda star IP on path P times the ratio of the length of path P with respect to the smallest possible path. So look at S3 and its destination. Among all possible paths, there is possibly, so this is okay, in this case it's a unique path. So this is going to be 1, in which case theta 1 is actually 1. If there are multiple paths, what we are doing here is you're taking a weighted sum of this lambda star IP with respect to how large your path you're choosing with respect to the how smallest possible path available there is. So that will define for each source destination pair how large theta is. And the theta network, which gives us the guarantee, is the maximum over all possible source destination pairs. So is this theta I clear or should I say more? So
I think the example is you gave.
Example is coming. Yeah. But lambda star IP is clear, right? Lambda star IP is a solution of the convex program. From that, you just take a linear combination, which is weighted with respect to the length of the different paths for the same source destination pair. So this is completely defined for the single source destination pair. Nothing else is happening here. So look at all paths from SI to DI. Look at the length of that path divided by the minimum length of a path over that. And you take the linear sum of this and divide it by the total traffic going through SI to DI. That is what theta I looks like. I'll give an example in a second. So first thing to notice is that this guarantee is actually easy to compute. This just directly comes from solution of the convex program. So this is again very what's it, non-traditional, that we are giving a guarantee which is needs to be computed. So I don't know the exact answer for this. All of it depends on what lambda star is, and lambda star is a solution of a convex program. So to make sense of all this, let's look at a simple example. So let's say S3 and D3 is my isolated source destination pair. So and there are two distinct paths, L3, so LP and LP prime, which have possibly different lengths. So let's say LP prime is shorter than LP. So now let's take an example where the length of the maximum length of path compared to the minimum length of a path for the same source destination pair be less than some constant. So I'm using C, but this need not be the same as before. So some constant. What it will entail is that theta I itself is less than C. And why is that? Because this ratio is less than C for all paths, and this summation lambda star IP is always equal to lambda I by our flow conservation. So theta I itself will be less than C for a network where for each source destination pair, the length of the longest path to the length of the shortest path is bounded by a constant. So for a well-balanced network, what we end up getting is that the second parameter which controls the competitive ratio is a constant. Now look at a non-well-balanced network where length of longest and shortest paths are much longer. So let's suppose that there exists a path P prime while there is a shortest path of length 1, let's suppose. In general, let this depend on the size of the network itself. So V represents the number of vertices of the graph. In this case, what is happening that this ratio could be extremely large. So this ratio is extremely large. But what is the saving grace? This lambda star IP will essentially take care of this, because for longer paths, the lambda star IP is likely to be very small compared to shorter paths. So even though this ratio is large, the lambda star IP is going to be small. And overall, if you put it together, the theta I and the theta network are going to be small. So in a well-balanced network where length of longest to shortest paths are small, we anyway get a constant competitive ratio. For unbalanced network where there are extremely long paths and there are extremely short paths, in that case, the fraction of traffic going through the long path is going to be much smaller than the fraction of traffic going through a smaller path, in which case, again, this quantity remains small, and we get that the competitive ratio is small. So we don't get explicit answer in the network stochastic case. See, the guarantee which we gave for the worst case holds for the network case, holds for the stochastic case also, because that's much more general. But in the stochastic case, we are able to give it as a form of a convex program solution, and we can conclude some results about given the structure of the network. So with that, let me conclude. I'm, I think, already over time. So in summary, what I really want to convey the point is that speed scaling, or speed scaling as it is called, that controlling the speed of the network with the objective of controlling the flow time and the total energy consumption, it's a very complicated problem. We have only given upper bounds. We're not given any lower bounds as such. So we don't know how far are we from the best possible algorithm. But this is kind of the first work in this direction, which we were able to do. In the worst case for the network, we were able to show that if Dmax is the worst congestion or the largest degree of a node in the network, that's how the competitive ratio scales. In the stochastic setting, we're able to show that for nice networks, competitive ratio is small, and even for not nice networks, we can actually give you an exact answer if you could solve a convex program. So with that, I will stop and take questions if there are any.
So any questions from the audience? Okay, I think we had some questions in the middle. So thanks a lot, Rahul. Very interesting talk.
Yeah, hopefully. How far did I go? Okay.
No, it's just 5 minutes over time.
I typically don't like going over, but I yeah, as I was going through, I thought it was okay to slow down because there are some things which are maybe people are seeing it for the first time. So
Yeah, yeah. So thanks anyways. Thanks for
problem.
the talk. Enjoyed it.
So there's one announcement to make. If there are any students who are interested in online algorithms, I'm actually offering a course this time, which doesn't happen often. And the course will be also taught in the online mode. So if you could announce it to your students, I can have 1 or 2 students in my class. I won't mind.
Okay, online algorithms. Huh? So
Yeah.
you just can you send me an email? That will
I
be
will.
easier to.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. So it will be full course as you, like a usual run course.
Mm.
Because of our current situation, we're teaching online. So this gives an advantage of reaching out to more people because our number of students are very small. So we put in so much effort and there are 2 students in the class. So if there are more interested
Okay.
parties, it helps
Sure.
both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot, Rahul.
Sure.
So we
Everything else
will
is fine?
stop the meeting.
All
Huh?
well?
Yeah.
How's your director now? He made national headlines.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's fine. He's fine now. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.